started. So thanks for coming to Beyond Bio. Today's event is about birds and wildlife of Toronto, which hopefully you're interested in. This is one of my favorite topics, so I'm really happy to talk to you about it. I will say most of this talk will be me talking at you. It's kind of hard to get around that, but there'll be a couple of times I might ask you some questions, and if you'd like to answer them or participate, we do have chocolates or stickers left over from the Bio 120 social if you'd like a reward for participation. So just wave at Flora, she can give you some. So this is the presentation. We're going to get started. There's three main takeaways I'd like you to take away from this talk. One is that anyone can be a naturalist. We're going to talk about what a naturalist is. Two is that nature is everywhere, including where you might not think it is. And related to that, three is that Toronto has more biodiversity than you may think. A lot of times when I talk about going bird watching or being a naturalist in Toronto, students are like, well, you know, we're not in Costa Rica, it's not that exciting here. We're not in Costa Rica, but we do have a lot of biodiversity here, more than you might think. And Toronto, one of the city mottos is that we're a city within a park because we have so many parks in the city. So there's a lot of great places to see nature and to see evolution in action in the city. So I hope I will have persuaded you of that by the end of the talk. A few quick notes. There's going to be lots of photos in this presentation. I will also say if you're curious about what any photo is, feel free to raise your hand or just interrupt me, I don't mind. I'm happy to tell you if it's not labeled. This means there are also some some photos of like insects or snakes. So if you have any concerns about that, I am sorry, I will try to warn you when they're coming up. There's not very many, it's mostly birds, and we'll talk about why in a second. Most of these tips apply broadly, but the specific examples will be about Toronto. And we're going to talk a lot about birds. And the reason we focus on birds is because birds are a great gateway to the rest of nature. There are a couple of reasons that birds are so popular. You can find them anywhere, no matter what habitat. You could walk outside this building, you'll find birds. They're loud, not all of them, but enough of them that you can hear them. They're often colorful, they're often flying around, so they're easier to see than, say, many mammals who often spend much of their life underground. And most importantly, in my opinion, there's a huge community of bird watchers. It's a huge industry, something like $1 billion, and there's tons of resources out there for people who are first getting into it. So if you're interested in nature, you'll find tons of beginner resources, people who want to help you. There's lots of apps and stuff. So it's a very easy way to get into it, and then that can kind of open the door to other parts of the ecosystem. So a lot of these organisms that you might see, like frogs and mammals and insects, you're going to see if you go out bird watching. So first off, what is a naturalist? So historically, naturalist and biologist were kind of interchangeable, but now they've kind of split apart. Many of you will become biologists. You're in Bio 120. Some of you, I hope, will also become naturalists. A naturalist is basically someone who goes out into nature with the purpose of observing that nature and learning about what they're seeing. So if you go walking in the woods and you think, what's that? You're already on your way to being a naturalist. It's a great hobby, in my opinion, because it's free. You don't need anything. You could spend money, you can go out to fancy places, but you could just go to a city park, take a water bottle so you don't get dehydrated, and that's an afternoon. If you want some more equipment, you can get apps, many of which are free. You can get outdoor gear, a lot of people take binoculars. I personally like taking my camera, but you don't need any of that. You can just walk for free, and it's great. If you're out in nature and you're hoping to see some wildlife, a couple of basic tips is to be quiet. This is kind of one of the most obvious ones, but also one of the trickiest ones to master because you want to keep walking. It's hard to just stop and not do anything for a few minutes, especially if you're with friends, you want to talk. But animals can hear you coming. It's amazing what you'll see if you just walk into the woods, stop, and put a timer on your phone and say, I'm not going to say anything or move for 5 to 10 minutes. Many more species will come out, and you may have thought there was nothing there. Something that takes a little practice is watching for movement that looks alive. You get used to this the more you do it, but as you walk through the woods, you start to distinguish. In the fall, it's tricky because there's a lot of leaves falling, which can sound like birds, but you start to learn to scan the environment and kind of pick up movement that looks alive. At the beginning, anytime you hear movement, try and figure out what it is, because that will help you train yourself on what's an animal versus what's just a rustling leaf. Something I think is really neat and a real benefit of being a naturalist and going out into nature is that you learn to think naturally. And you start to see things differently. There's a famous quote that's like, once you learn bird song, you never hear the world the same way again. Because when you start to notice the calls of birds, you start to pick them up in the background all the time. As my friends will attest, I constantly stop in the middle of a conversation to go, what was that? But most people don't notice them because they just fade into the background noise. When you start to notice, a whole world opens up to you. So this is front campus with our amazing new renovation. I don't know if you guys know what it looked like before, but it was a lot uglier. The new gardens are very nice. So on front campus, if we're looking at this here, you know, do we see any good habitats here? What might we see here? Does anyone have any ideas? Yeah.
Wasps.
Why wasps?
Just people are eating food.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Exactly. There would definitely be wasps there, in particular yellow jackets, which are everyone's least favorite wasps. But there's lots of species of wasps in Toronto, and in fact, you can see an incredible diversity of wasps here. And yeah, you can definitely see them here because there's food. People might spill things. Sugar on the ground is very attractive to wasps. Did you have any idea?
Yeah, I have like maybe any kind of like scavenger or small rodent that
Yeah.
can make their home in there. They can like kind of like invade any of the buildings around and like make a nest there. They can survive the winter because it's warm in there.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is definitely campus is home to many, many mice, probably rats too. But also, what's a famous scavenger that we have in Toronto? You can just shout out. You might say it's the mascot of the city. Anybody know? Yeah.
Is it a raccoon?
Yeah. So there's lots of raccoons in Toronto, and raccoons love campus. They're around all the time. I see them sleeping in trees all the time. People don't notice them because they sleep at the tops of trees. Take a look up there sometimes. They're mostly nocturnal, so during the day they sleep, but at night they come down and they rummage in the garbage. So yeah, so absolutely. Anyone have any other ideas? Yeah.
Sparrows.
Why sparrows?
They're all sparrows.
Yeah, very good. So those are house sparrows. We're going to talk about those, but absolutely you will see house sparrows here. I see them every time I go to Con Hall. And they are also here because they love food crumbs. Yeah.
Bird, like any kind of bird, thanks to the fact that there's a lot of perching areas that resemble their kind of mountain biomes. Also, they fly into windows a lot.
They do, unfortunately. Something we are trying to work on campus. On Ramsey Wright, if you notice when you come in off St. George, those windows there, the big windows, have dots all over them. Those dots are to break up the reflection and prevent birds from flying into them, which is great because birds definitely hit that window before, so that is a great change. But yes, so there's lots of trees here actually. It's not a forest, it's, you know, a planted garden, but you'd be amazed at how much diversity does come out and use this kind of environment. Especially in a downtown area, there's not much greenery. So any patch will be very popular with birds that are here all the time, but also with birds that migrate. Toronto is on a huge migration path, so every fall and spring there's a huge sheer mass of birds that travel through, and they will land on any green space they can because they're trying to get over their city and they're exhausted. So campus is actually an amazing place to see wildlife. Of course, most of nature watching that we do is in parks, but even in parks, you gotta train your eyes to look a little closer than just what you see initially. And again, this is where it helps to stop, look, and listen. So, if we're looking here, what's the first thing we see in terms of nature?
Bird.
The bird. Does anyone know what kind of bird this is?
Stork.
Some kind of heron.
Really good guesses, both of you. This is, yes, well done. This is a great egret, but very closely related to herons. And storks are slightly off taxonomically, I believe, but very similar body shape. So this is a great egret. This is unmistakable bird. If you come on our nature walk in October, we will almost certainly see these. They love the Humber River in the fall. They're really cool. They're like 5 feet tall. You can't miss them. They're bright white. But if we look a little closer, there's also some other animals in this picture. So does anyone see anything else? They're really blended in. Yeah?
It could just be that I'm far away, but is that a turtle in the bottom left?
Well done. Yes, it absolutely is a turtle. I will circle it in a minute for anyone who didn't see it. There's also one other thing. Does anyone see anything else? Yeah.
What's that like? Is that like that white blob underneath that like massive reeds?
Yes, that is a mallard duck. So right here we have a duck who's sleeping in the reeds because it's a nice safe place for him. And then over there, there's actually 2 turtles, one going each way. They're a little hard to see. But yeah, it's very easy. This is in High Park, and this particular spot in High Park always has tons of turtles, and I watch like hundreds of people walk by and not even notice them. So just using some naturalist eyes, you can see a whole bunch more than you might expect. This is also just a tip that I couldn't figure out where to put it in the talk, so it's here. But if you're ever out looking at nature, or even if you're just walking around the city, if you hear birds making a ton of noise and it sounds really dramatic, particularly if they're crows or like cawing, or blue jays, if you know what they sound like, they're very abrasive sounding, go check it out, because often they are chasing away predators. Many birds do a behavior called mobbing, and that's where they gang up on a hawk or an owl and chase them out of their territory. So in this case, actually this isn't mobbing, this was a fight between some common ravens and a red-tailed hawk over the Brickworks Park in the Don Valley. This is my favorite example of mobbing I've ever seen. This is a red-tailed hawk, and this is a barn swallow. Look at the size difference. This brave little barn swallow and his friends were trying to chase this hawk off. They were not very successful. But it's cool if you hear the noise, because you might see a really cool like sky battle going on. The other thing I want to say is that I often do this talk in the fall and winter, and then students are like, oh, but it's like the worst time, it's not summer anymore. Nature keeps going in winter. Winter is just part of our ecosystem. It's totally normal. We don't have as much biodiversity, a lot of species leave for migration, but we also get some species that only come here in winter. One of those, a rare visitor, is the snowy owl. This is at Sam Smith Park, which is where we're going for our second nature walk. But these are quite rare, but they do come in the winter sometimes. But we also have some birds that only come here in the winter, and they're very common. So dark-eyed juncos, we'll only see them in the winter. They come down from further north. Trumpeter swans, which are an amazing sight, and they were recently endangered, so it's really cool to see them. And then winter ducks, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So if you go out, you find some stuff. How do you know what you see? One thing I'll say is that some people like going out in nature and they don't care what they see. They don't want to identify the species, and that's totally okay. It's supposed to be a hobby. So if it's not fun for you to identify them, don't worry about it. It doesn't need to be a chore. Personally, I think it's a lot of fun to try and identify them. Whenever I do this part of the talk, I feel like that meme that's like, hello, fellow kids. But if you like playing video games and like collecting achievements, for example, it's very similar, except it's out in real life and you're also getting exercise and learning about nature. So if you get into like birding, for example, a lot of people keep a life list. So you keep track of the species you see. I keep a life list on iNaturalist, which I'll talk about later. It's a website. And every year I set a goal for myself for how many new species to add. And it's just kind of fun. It's a fun goal to set. You learn more about the life around you. This is comics. This is a website called Bird and Moon. She does lots of comics on nature watching, and I love them. And this is just a comparison of birding and video games. I encourage you to check out her website. So if you do want to identify things, there's a couple of things you need to keep in mind. One is, what time of year is it? This can make a huge difference on what you're looking for. We have 4 seasons. Spring and fall are our migration seasons. During spring and fall, you got lots of things moving in and moving out. And during that time, the number of species you may see could double or triple. That is an ID challenge because you have a lot more things to narrow it down from, but it's also really exciting because you can add lots of new species during this time. Many bird watchers spend all of migration season out in the parks. For birds, and particularly for insects and flowers and plants, what you're looking for to identify them will depend on the month and the time of year. So it's really important that you know when you are. Also, obviously, very important to know where you are. You'll see different things in different habitats, and the more you go out, the more you get used to what's normal in each habitat. Especially if you have a local park, you'll get to know what's really common in certain areas. Once you've got those 2 facts, and then you've seen something and you think, what is that? If you can, always good to take a photo, but if you can't, take notes. It's old school, but it works. Try and write down anything that you think might be helpful in identifying it. And then there's lots of resources out there. We are living in the golden age of resources to try and identify things. Online resources and apps, the most popular now. Like with everything else, there's an app for that. These are a couple of websites and apps. There's many, many more, depending on what you're looking at and what you're trying to identify. If you're looking into birds, All About Birds by Cornell Lab is the #1 website in North America. It's an incredible database, and this is again why I say birds are a great intro, because you will not find a database like this for any other group of species, not as easily accessed. For All About Birds, you can look up any North American bird, and it will show you pictures of what they look like, all sexes, all ages, a map of where they're found, recordings of all their sounds, a detailed explanation of their life history and how they act, ID tips, behavior, a recent sightings map from online resources. It's just an incredible website. So if you're looking at birds, your first stop should always be to look at Cornell. But I also want to put a plug for books. So some of my ID guides are in the back or maybe around the room. Feel free to take a look at them after if you like. I think apps are wonderful. I use them. Everybody uses them. I think books are better at training you to ID yourself. With an app, you're often like uploading a photo and it tells you what it is, which is amazing, but it doesn't really teach you like what about that organism let you identify it. A book will often be like, these are the identifying marks you look for in the field, and they're things you didn't even think of, like, did it flash white under the tail? You might not have thought of that, right? So if you're really getting into something, I encourage you to get a book. If you're in Toronto, it's Eastern North America is usually the area that we're in. But speaking of apps, if you're going to get into nature, or even if you're mildly interested, I recommend Merlin. Merlin is a free app. It's huge right now. It's also from Cornell. This is like one of the premier bird labs in the world. And Merlin, download it for free. And if you turn it on while you're out listening to birds, it will pick up the sounds and identify what's making those sounds. It's incredible. I went on a trip this summer to an area I don't know, and I used it so much because I don't know the birds there. And I would turn it on and it would be like, this is a chip-chap. And I was like, oh, great. It's just incredible. And it helps you train your ear to the sounds. It can also, if you upload photos, try and identify birds for you. This is bird only. The other website I want to highlight, because this is my favorite website in the world, they don't pay me, I just love them. This is iNaturalist.org. It also has an app version. iNaturalist is not bird only, and it's also not North America only. iNaturalist is worldwide, and it's for any living thing. It's basically trying to make a huge citizen science database. It's incredible for many reasons. I could go on and on about it. If you want to know about more about iNaturalist, come talk to me after. But basically, you can upload a photo or a sound recording of anything. It could be like a dead weed on the ground. And first off, it has an AI thing that tries to identify it for you, which is pretty good because it's trained on a lot of scientific observations. But then there's a huge community who try and identify things for you. So people who are like experts in fish, if you upload a fish, will try and find it. If at least 2 users identify it to species, it's considered research grade, and it's actually added to citizen science databases that are used for research around the world. So it's incredibly cool. I love iNaturalist. If you're into nature, I recommend it. Okay, so we've got resources, we know where to go, we know what we're looking for. What are we actually going to see? I'm going to show you some specific examples in Toronto of where to go and what you might see there. Before I get into the specific species, I just want to highlight a few particular challenges if you're doing bird ID. So, this bird up here, does anybody know what bird this is? It's okay if you don't. It's also a bit of a trick question, so even if you know birds, it might be tricky. This is a female. The males look very different. This is the male. So this is a red-winged blackbird. The name makes perfect sense for the male. This is true of many bird species, because many bird species were named after the male's markings because they were usually cataloged first. The female does have a slight red wing. It's vestigial. It's on her shoulder, but she's not black, and she looks very, very different. And for many, many birders, you try and mark that down as a new species, and then you look it up later and realize it was a female redwing. These guys are great. You will see them in Toronto in the spring. They're gone by now because they only stay in the summer. But in the spring, they're one of the first birds to come back, and then they're everywhere in a park. If you go to a park in spring, you will see these birds. Another tricky thing is that up here, does anyone know what this is? I ask because often there are like bird watchers in the audience who then correct me. So this is an American goldfinch, a very common bird in the fall. This is a male, but this is also a male. This is a male in fall. So this is a male in spring. He's in full breeding plumage. He's trying to attract a female. He's putting all his energy into maintaining these beautiful feathers. But in the fall, he doesn't need to devote all that energy anymore. And he has to migrate. So you don't want to devote all that energy because you need that energy to move like hundreds of kilometers. So instead, he loses those bright colors. So this is why it's important to know what time of year you're at, because they're going to be in different plumage. And a lot of birds have breeding plumage and non-breeding plumage. And then the last thing I'll just point out is down here, these are all different sparrows. They're in the same family, but they're different species. All of these species are extremely common in Toronto. You can see them all the time. When you start with birding, often you look at species like this and you think, I am never going to figure this out. Especially, these guys are small, they're hopping along the ground, and when you're in the field, you're like, I don't know what that is. It looks like a sparrow. When I started birding, I found sparrows incredibly challenging. But you really do build up a skill. It's like any other skill, and you'd be amazed at how quickly you pick it up. Sparrows, to me, very common now, like very familiar. As soon as I see them, I know what they are, just from the way they're moving. You start to pick up clues that you don't realize you're picking up. Now there's warblers, which are a whole other challenge for me. But eventually I'll get there with warblers. So if you start, all I'm saying is don't get discouraged. Okay, so now we're going to look at some specific Toronto species and areas. I do want to note that Toronto, as I was trying to say earlier, has huge biodiversity, more than you might expect. This is an extremely brief intro. I had to really edit myself down on how many species I was talking about because it turns into just a long list of species. I hope that's not what it is anymore. But all of these are species you can see in Toronto. All of these photos were taken in Toronto. Actually, all the photos in this presentation were taken in Toronto. And none of these are even that rare. These are all quite common species. They're really cool. So I'm just scratching the surface here. And I also want to say I'm going to be mostly talking about birds, but we do have lots of other wildlife in Toronto. Again, these are all species you can see really commonly. Here's our raccoon up here, our mascot. But many of these species are very common in the city. So you'd be amazed at what you can see. I'm going to talk mostly about parks for where to go. Actually, that's not what our first scene is, not in a park. But anyway, I just want to point out that, again, if you're thinking naturally, you never know when you're going to see animals. This little guy, this is a black-throated blue warbler. He was migrating through in the fall, and I found him on my lunch break on the lawn of Queen's Park. I was extremely excited, and I was really lucky I had my camera. This guy is a baby red-tailed hawk, and this is actually on the Daniels Architecture Building. Every year, a pair of hawks raise their babies on that building. You can see them from Spadina. It's really cute, and you can watch them grow up. We tend to go on our lunch break. So anywhere you go, if you have your eyes open, you never know what you're going to see. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of habitat types, where you can go to these habitat types, what you might see there. The first one is just on the street. While you're walking around the city, downtown, you can still see wildlife. People tend to be like, yeah, but that's the boring wildlife because you see it all the time. But they're still interesting. If you start to think about them, you realize how much is going on right in front of you. So these are some species that you might just see on the street. You don't need an actual area. And these species, I'm not going to talk about all of the ones that I highlighted in these pictures, but they're all super common downtown. I am going to highlight a few species in particular. So house sparrow, we mentioned earlier. If you're ever on a patio and there's a little brown bird hopping around trying to get your crumbs, it's a house sparrow. House sparrows are not native to North America. They were originally in Europe and Asia. They got introduced by human beings, and now they are the most widespread songbird in the world. They're everywhere. House sparrows, the males and females, they're sexually dimorphic, so they do look different. That's not true of all birds, but for many of them it is. So the males have this black patch, which gets much darker and bigger during breeding time, but it's still there in the winter, just less. And then the females are all kind of a solid brown. They're different than our native sparrows because most of our native sparrows have stripes on the chest, and the female house sparrows do not. These guys, they're super cute, they're really interesting to watch, and it's amazing how they've adapted to basically everywhere in the world. We take them for granted, I think, but it's kind of incredible that they've managed to do that. They're like this big. Another species that I like to highlight that people don't often pay attention to is, we always talk about seagulls. If you're ever with bird watchers, they will frown at you if you say the word seagull. Seagull is a bad word for birders because there's no species actually called seagull. They're called gulls, and gulls are actually really complicated. There's 30 plus species of gulls in Canada. We get many of them in Toronto, and they are a huge ID challenge. They're really hard to ID, and for many birders, it's like an elite thing to be able to ID gulls. You'll often, if you go to a park on the water, you'll see if there's a flock of gulls, you'll see like tons of people with huge cameras trying to figure out if any of those gulls are rare. Where you are in the world determines which species you're talking about. If you talk about a seagull, so these are different gulls that may be called seagulls in the local area. For us, it's almost always the ring-billed gull. Ring-billed gulls, they thrive in urban areas. But again, it's cool. This is another thing I like about being a naturalist is when you travel, it adds an extra dimension. When I was traveling this summer, a birder where I was in the UK was like, oh, you guys get ring-billed gulls. I've only seen them once in my life. It was incredible. And I'm like, nobody pays attention to them there. They're just in the parking lot. So, what's really common to you will be very cool to someone else. Gulls, they are actually really long-lived. They can live over 30 years. So some of those seagulls that you see around may be older than some of you. It takes them quite a long time to grow up. They may take up to 5 years to get their adult coloring. This is a ring-billed gull adult. They have bright yellow legs, and they have this black ring on their bill. The juvenile gulls all look the same, almost impossible to ID. Juveniles are kind of brown, mottled, and their beak markings are different. But of course, you can see things downtown, but you're going to get more biodiversity if you're in green spaces. So in the city, that will be mostly parks, although I include this robin down here who's on a grave, because cemeteries are an incredible place to see biodiversity. Obviously, be respectful if you go to a cemetery, but they often have large mature trees, gardens, green space, it's quiet, so you'll see a lot of wildlife there. Generally, you have the best luck if there's mature trees that host more life, that there's cover, and especially access to water. Anywhere there's water, you're going to probably find something. If you're interested in insects, gardens are incredible. Around Harvard, there are so many good pollinator gardens. Sometimes I just walk around and try and see how many species of wasp I can see, or butterfly. I can't really get into insects in this talk or it would be 5 hours long, but insects are really cool. So if you're interested in them, check out iNaturalist, check out Bug Guide, it's great. All right, so another habitat highlight is campus itself and Queen's Park. So these are two big green spaces in a part of the city where there's not a lot of green space. So you can actually see quite a lot of species here, particularly during migration, but these are some of the most common. And in particular, I'm going to talk about the eastern gray squirrel. So these are the squirrels that you see around the city. They're the urban squirrels. They like being out in concrete. They don't care if there's trees. Well, they need trees, but they don't need that many. There's two color morphs. People often think they're different species, but they're the same species. It's just a genetic variation. So this is the gray morph, and this is the black morph, and there's some variation in between. They are happy in the parks, they're happy in the forests, and they're also happy downtown. So you'll see them around, and in Queen's Park, they'll probably chase you begging for food because they're extremely spoiled here. Red-tailed hawks are one of our most urban birds. People don't often think of them, but they are all over downtown. There's a pair that nests on the Daniels building for architecture. There's a pair that nests at Queen's Park on the building. There's a pair that nests at Robarts. I see them all the time outside Ramsey Wright, circling the Robarts Library. They love the city. It's like a cliff. They like to sit on the buildings. They nest there. They hunt the pigeons. They hunt the squirrels. They're very happy downtown. There's a lot of variation in hawk markings, but generally, if you see a big hawk and you guess it's a red-tailed, you're right. But also they have a reddish tail when they're adult, and they have a band across their stomach. But campus, Queen's Park is great. If you want to get a lot of biodiversity, you are probably going to have to go to a bigger, more natural park. So this is a map of all the parks in Toronto. This is why we say a city within a park. We have, but some of them are really incredible places to see wildlife. So there's two major kinds of habitat that we mostly see. There's also wetlands, which I won't get into because that's a whole other thing, but wetlands are also great. But a lot of our parks are forests. So this is a picture of Lambton Woods in the West End. And you'll notice there's more species. There's so many species I could highlight in the forest. It was really hard to pick which ones I was going to talk about. There's a lot of biodiversity in these forests with mature trees. In particular, black-capped chickadees, one of the most common birds in a Toronto forest. They are here year-round. They're the smallest bird that spend the winter here. They're about the size of a tennis ball, and they have incredible adaptations to let them survive the winter. They induce hypothermia in themselves at night, so that they basically go into stasis overnight so they don't freeze. They have very cool adaptations. They're very complex species, and they communicate with different calls. And in particular, they're famous for the call that goes chickadee-dee-dee, And that's actually a warning call. And there's research that shows the number of Ds at the end actually communicates what kind of predator there is. Like, is it from the air or the ground? And other species of birds can actually understand these calls from chickadees because they associate together in the winter. So, for instance, a woodpecker may respond to the chickadee alarm call. So I think that's really cool. They're cool little birds. You see them hopping around. You don't realize there's a lot going in there. Northern cardinals. I think Cornell once said that the northern cardinal has gotten more people into bird watching than any other bird because they are extremely common and they're extremely beautiful and they make people go, what is that? So this is a male. The male is the famous very bright red. The female's also extremely beautiful in my opinion. They still have the red beak. They're mostly brown, but they have the red crest as well. These guys, they don't usually travel in flocks. They're usually alone or in pairs, but they're here year round, and you often see them in the winter because they stand out so beautifully against the snow. In terms of mammals, we have another species of squirrel in Toronto called the red squirrel or the pine squirrel. These guys are more common in northern Ontario, if anyone's from up there. They love big pine trees, but they're actually getting quite common in Toronto Park. So if you're in a forested area, you'll never see them downtown. They're not on campus. But if you're in an area with big pine trees, they will be there. If you come to our second nature walk, we're very likely to see them. They're very loud. They're smaller than our other squirrels, but they will yell at you a lot. Again, I can't go into all of species in forests, though I would love to. But I just want to highlight there's often many different species in the same family within our forests. So if you're interested in woodpeckers, these are actually only 3 of our woodpeckers. We have 8 species, I believe. These are the most common. And then nuthatches, we have 2 species. These are, again, extremely common birds that we're likely to see. And then distinguishing, does anyone have any idea to tell these 2 apart? Can you see anything from these photos? Yeah?
I think one is significantly larger than the other.
Yes, correct. Yeah, you're right. The hairy is the larger. Yeah, I tried to make the photo a little larger. Anyone notice anything else? Yeah?
That kind of the orange amount of the orange feathers around the beak, I guess, on the...
Ah, interesting. You're right that these 2 individuals are different, but actually that's not a systemic difference between the 2 species. So that's where it gets a little tricky because there's often individual variation too. So this is where it helps to kind of learn the field marks. It's a good guess though, because you're right, it does look different between these 2. Anyone have any other guesses? All right, well the other one, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Like the red patch in the back of their head.
Yeah, good guess. So only the males have this red patch in both species, but there is a difference in the hairy. The red patch is split up by the black, and the downy, it's not split. The other thing that's helpful is that downies have these black spots on the white outer tail feathers, and hairies don't. But you don't often see those feathers. The real difference is that hairies are much bigger. But distinguishing these 2 species is every birder's first challenge. In terms of going to a forest, my favorite park is High Park. This is one of our best parks in the city. It's the biggest natural park owned by the city itself. Rouge Park is bigger, but it's federal. High Park is easily accessible by multiple subway stations. It has many kinds of habitats, savanna, forest, wetland, a large pond connected to the lake. You can see an incredible number of species here. Over 267 species of birds have been recorded in High Park. So if you're interested in nature, or you just want to walk around, because it's a beautiful park, it has a restaurant, it's really nice, it has gardens, check out High Park. Beyond the forest, a general guideline for any nature watching is to follow water. So these are 2 major rivers in Toronto, the Humber and the Don. The Humber's in the west end, the Don's in the east end. And these rivers are their own particular habitat, bursting with life. A lot in Toronto depends on these 2 rivers running well. So this is a picture of the Humber River. This is where we're going on our nature walk. And these are some species that you can see more particularly on the rivers. So you've probably, who's seen these? Put up your hand if you've ever seen these. Yeah. So these are mallards. These are probably the most common duck in the world. Males have this bright green head, and the females are overall brown. Most ducks are sexually dimorphic, so they look very different between the sexes. And these are probably the most common duck in the world. We have another gull that's very common once you get onto the waterfront. So these are herring gulls. They are distinguished from ring-billed gulls because they're much bigger. They have, you can't really see here, but they have pink legs instead of the bright yellow. And their beaks have this red dot instead of the ring. And these guys are very common in the rivers. They're much bigger. They tend to scavenge large fish and harass ring-billed gulls and chase them for their food. And then this is what we saw earlier. This is a great egret. So we have many herons and egrets in Toronto, but great egrets are one of the most common. You will often see them sitting in the water, not moving for a very long time, because they wait for prey to come near them, and then they strike really fast and catch. Here they've got, like, I think a sunfish. And then I'm not going to talk about these guys too much, but there's a couple of species that in the fall are really common. You don't see them the rest of the time. So if you go out now or in October, you're very likely to see goldfinches. Goldfinches, if you ever go past a garden with sunflowers, look at the sunflower, because goldfinches love to sit on them and pick out all the seeds in the fall. And people don't even notice them. They're often just sitting in the garden in large numbers. And then kinglets, they're very tiny, but they tend to migrate through at this time. This is a park highlight. This is Etienne Brûlé. So this is at Old Mill subway station, and it's part of a chain of parks going along the Humber River, so you can follow it quite far. This is an amazing place to see lots of wildlife, but in particular, it's the best place, in my opinion, to see the salmon migration. So these are a couple species of salmon here jumping. This is Etienne Brûlé. And in the fall, they jump up these dams, and it's very cool. Everybody just sits on the side and like cheers for the salmon. And you can see like 100 salmon jumping in an hour if you're lucky. We are going on a nature walk on October 11th, which should be the peak of salmon migration, to hopefully see this ourselves. So if you're interested, feel free to sign up. You can sign up on Quercus. It's very fun. This is my favorite nature walk to run because it's just very cool. Okay, and then of course we have another water source in Toronto. Anyone have any ideas beyond the rivers where we might see wildlife on the water?
Lake.
Yeah. So of course we're on a Great Lake, which is incredible habitat. So the Lake Ontario shoreline, incredible habitat. We're lucky enough to have lots of parks along the shoreline. I'm going to highlight one of them, but there's many others. On the lake, this is Sam Smith Park. You will see many species that you won't see on the rivers that need deeper water, particularly in the winter. So these are a couple of species you might see here. Particularly, this is another one that probably many people have seen, Canada geese. Sorry, I just realized that it still has the egret note. Don't look at that. They're not sit and wait predators. They just go around eating algae. Actually, Canada geese are really interesting. They live in family groups. If you see a flock of them, they're often very related. It'll be like kids and siblings all hanging out together. They do mate for life, one of the few birds where that's actually true. And they're very cool to see. We take them for granted, but I think they're pretty neat. We also have beavers. So you can actually see beavers on the river, but they also love the lakeshore because there's more space for them. Beavers, who's seen it? The audience, probably more people have seen a beaver here than any talk I've done. And I think my theory is that's because they're increasing in Toronto. Over the last few years, I've seen more beavers here than I have in my entire life. Anyway, they're larger than you think. They're pretty cool animals. And you can see them in many areas with waterways. That's what you might see at any time of the year, but this is another Bird and Moon comic. This is an extremely true comic about bird watching seasons. And I just want to highlight that we're almost at my favorite season, which is weird duck time. That's winter. So during the winter, we get many, many more species on the lake. So this is again Sam Smith, but in the snow. And this is just a small sample of what you might see. So I'll talk about the ducks in a second. We do have two species of swan. So mute swans, that's over here. They have orange beaks. This is a trumpeter swan. Trumpeter swans have black beaks. That's the biggest difference. Mute swans, following their name, rarely make noise. Trumpeter swans almost never stop talking. They're very loud. And trumpeter swans, these are our native swans. So historically they evolved here, and their numbers got extremely low up until quite recently. They were endangered. So there's a huge conservation program for trumpeter swans. So many trumpeter swans have this like large yellow tag on their wing so we can track them. A mute swan will never have that tag. Mute swans are not native, but they are everywhere here, and you'll often see these two kind of in conflict. Trumpeter swans you'll generally only see in winter. But the big exciting thing in the winter is that we get winter ducks. A lot of ducks breed in the Arctic, but then in the winter the Arctic is too cold for them. So they come down and they spend the winter on the Great Lakes because the lakes are not frozen. So we get tons of species that are only here in the winter. These are a couple of them. The long-tailed duck is my favorite. You should look up what they sound like because they make the best sound ever, and in my opinion that's the sound of Lake Ontario in the winter. There's scops, there's buffleheads, which are really cute, they're quite small. And these are diving ducks. Unlike our ducks in the rivers, they tend to dive really quickly and they come up with like mollusks and scallops. We also have mergansers. These are another type of duck. They're also called sawbills because they have sharp ridges along the beak, and that's to let them hold on to fish. And then here's a quick park highlight. This is Colonel Sam Smith Park. So this is where we're going to go for our second nature walk in November. And this is one of the best places to see winter ducks, which is why we're going there. It's also a great place to see mink, if we're lucky. They're not the most common mammals in Toronto, but I do see them pretty regularly there. And they like to swim and catch crayfish. And it's great views of the city, and in the winter they actually have an ice skating trail through the trees. So it's quite a cool park. I don't have time to get into many other wildlife species in this city, but there is an incredible diversity of insect life. If you're interested in insects, come talk to me. If you're interested in insects, I recommend getting into butterflies or pollinators because there's the most resources on them, and they're easy to find in gardens. It's a great intro insect. If you're interested in plants, which I have woefully neglected in this talk, lots of cool plants in Toronto. This fall, or any fall, this time of year is a huge time for asters and goldenrods. This is when they bloom. You'll see them everywhere if you go to a park. If you go to Humber River, they're everywhere. If you go to High Park, they're everywhere. Asters, there's many different species, so these are all asters here. They have these little flowers, pollinators love them. And then goldenrods, these are here. There's a bunch of species. They have these big sprays of golden flowers, very popular with bees. Oh, well, that's a whoops. That's a ring-billed gull versus a herring gull. You can see the size difference here. And that is basically the end of my talk, but I'm going to very quickly test you. There's no stakes. It's okay if you don't know. But just to see if we've taken away some species here, does anyone know what this is?
A bird.
A bird is correct. Let's see if we can get a little closer. Anyone have an idea on what kind of bird?
Sparrow? House sparrow?
House sparrow. House sparrow. Well done. Is this a male or a female?
No.
Well done. Good job. How about this? Anybody know? That's right. This is a black-capped chickadee, most common in the forests.
Trumpeter swan.
How do you know it's a trumpeter swan?
No orange.
Well done. These are trumpeter swans. Does anyone know what's behind them?
Mallard.
Yes.
Female cardinal.
Female cardinal. Well done. And that's our last one. Yes. This is easy because he's sticking his long tail up. They're often under the water. All right, and that's it. So thank you for coming. Help yourself to snacks on the way out. And yeah, feel free to come up if you have any questions.
Hello.
Hey.
My name is Isabel, and it's funny that you talked about the northern cardinal because
Yes.
it's actually wooden spoons from. I get them like every morning in my room.
Amazing.
I live at Trinity, so
Ah, look at that. You can tell he's, look at him sitting out there. We have a cardinal that lives outside our windows at Ramsey Wright too.
okay.
You can see he's molting too.
Oh.
He's lost some feathers in his crest. Quite normal at this time of year. The cardinals are great parents. They put a lot of themselves into their kids. By the end of the breeding season, they're very ragged. Then they have to like recover over the next term. So that's probably a dad there who's been raising his kid.
Okay.
Oh, that's a great video. Yeah, it's amazing. They get so many people into birds because they're just so beautiful.
They are. And in the winter, you said that there's also a contrast with like the snow.
Yeah, they look. A cardinal in a snowstorm is one of the prettiest sights you'll ever see. They're very common in High Park in the winter, in particular, because people feed them there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and they sing beautifully too. In the spring, they never shut up.
Yeah, that's how I.
Yeah. Well, very cool. That's a great video.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the presentation.
No problem. I'm glad you came.
Have a good day.
Hi.
So were you talking about asters and goldenrods?
Yeah.
It's funny because I literally just saw them this morning.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
staying at Loretto, and right outside
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have this strip of flowers, little garden.
Wow, and they have asters there. Oh, good. I'm always saying we should plant more native plants here. Very cool. Well, keep an eye on them because
Yeah.
there's so many insects that love asters. You can see such a variety there.
Yeah,
Very
it's
cool.
a great presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for coming.
What were some of the books you said to get into?
Yeah. So let me just pull
So I
up
know
my.
like next to nothing about nature and stuff.
So a book
But I
is a
saw-
good place to start.
I saw two squirrels chasing each other today, so I was like, oh, maybe I should come to this.
Very perfect. The squirrel's doing my work for me. So in terms of books, there's an almost unlimited variety. In my opinion, the Peterson. Hey, Flyer, are my books still there? I hope. Do you mind grabbing the Peterson Bird Guide? So in my opinion, the Peterson guides are the best beginner ones because they are specifically designed to give you ideas. Stuff. Thank you. Oh, sorry. You're grabbing the bird. Thank you. But this is very similar. So this is the Peterson Wildflower Guide. I'm actually going to contradict myself. For flowers, you better go online because there's no book that can hold all of them. But for birds, there's so many good guides out there. So yeah, the Peterson Guide is, in my opinion, my favorite. But if you're interested in birds, check out allaboutbirds.org because that website will teach you everything you need to know. But this is a Peterson Guide. So this is the way they're designed. And this is like Roger Tory Peterson came up with this idea. So it'll be everybody in the same family on the same page. And then if you read it, it'll say it'll point out specific things. So like, look at these markings on the other side of the wing. That will distinguish it from this bird. So they're really good if you're looking up a particular type of bird, and it will list everything in a particular area. So you'd want eastern birds for Toronto. We're always in the east. But yeah, try checking out All About Birds by Cornell, because it's such a great website, and you can look up any species there, and they'll just, I'll just bring it up, because it's really, I usually show it, but I was worried about running over time. All About Birds.
So you're gonna be another nature talk?
Not another nature talk, but we'll do are you signed up for the walk by any chance?
I'm going to the one in November. I wish I could go to the one on October, but unfortunately my brother was dumb and he decided to be born on that day.
Well, I guess that's allowed. It's tricky, I know, because it's Thanksgiving too. Okay, so this is All About Birds. So this is the bird guide. What I love about All About Birds is, okay, let's say cardinal. If you go to the cardinal page, it has photos of what they look like. You can see male and female. You can usually see juveniles too. There's juveniles. This is my favorite feature. They have similar speed. Okay, actually, this is a terrible example. There's nothing similar to cardinal. Let me go black and white warbler. Let's try that instead, because they're beautiful. Okay, so this is a black and white warbler, very common species in Toronto during the migration. And what I love about All About Birds is you can go to